This is not my Fred Astaire cane. If you're expecting me to do top hat, white tie and tails, I won't be doing that. I might do I'm Just a Girl Who Can't Say No, but I probably require a couple more drinks for that. That's the bad news. The good news is that in lieu of me doing I'm Just a Girl Who Can't Say No, I brought along a crackerjack pianist, Ross Patterson, and a Tony-nominated Best Actress, Marla Schaffel. So will you please welcome them? Marla, which she doesn't really need to do when you've been nominated for a Tony, but she was kind enough to do my Christmas show a couple of years back in Montreal, and we did that beloved Yuletide hate crime, Baby It's Cold Outside. We nearly made it. I think we got to within 8 bars of the end before the SWAT team kicked the door down and tasered us into submission. So I thank Marla for that. I saw John Steele Gordon, who was here the other night, and I thought he did a cracking job on the theatre, on the drama. But I would just like to make a comment. I've been told almost all my adult life that these days audiences will not accept on the big screen a man walking down the street and suddenly breaking into song with a full orchestra behind him, that people will not accept that convention anymore. That's totally unconvincing. But if you've seen X-Men 37, at your local multiplex, you'll know that it's perfectly natural and realistic and convincing for Cardboard Man to fly up into the sky, to rip a hole in the space-time continuum so that Captain Sequel and Franchise Girl can fly through it all the way back to 1958 and prevent the villain from ever being born. That's totally real. That's way more realistic than Fred Astaire walking down Fifth Avenue and breaking into Easter Parade. The stories a society tells itself matter. And if you saw That's Entertainment earlier today, you may recall the tagline on the poster from 1974, That's Entertainment, boy, do we need it now. Well, 50 years on, boy, do we need it even more. I'm here to talk about the songs because in its heyday, Broadway was the great central throughway of American popular culture. So a play, a live theatrical production playing for a couple of thousand people, maybe just a few hundred, each night in a New York theater, a play could provide the country's, sometimes the world's, #1 record, could supply the song on the jukebox in your local diner far from the big city. It could provide the song you got married to, what we would now call a standard. You may like the Frank Sinatra version, and you may prefer the Lady Gaga version, but these things came from plays. These are the songs from the classical age of popular music. There's no equivalent body of work before, and nothing like it since. It didn't last long, less than half a century as a going proposition. So we're going to start with the single most important song in the history of the American musical theater. As Mel Torme put it, when Jerome Kern composed this melody, he, quote, invented the popular song. Now, if your idea of a popular song is Taylor Swift or Jay-Z, or even the Tennessee Waltz, Mel Torme's claim may seem a stretch, but it's not unreasonable to say that with this tune, Kern invented what we now call the American Songbook, standards that endure across the decades and can be sung and played in almost any style. So it is the #1 song, the first and most influential entry in that American Songbook. The song that influenced so many of the others that followed, The Man I Love, It Had to Be You, As Time Goes By, Night and day, smoke gets in your eyes. The way you look tonight, I'll be seeing you. Till there was you, windmills of your mind, send in the clowns, and hundreds more are all the children of this song. It's from 1914. I had a television producer a couple of years ago. I referenced a song from the early 20s, and he said, I'm not really comfortable. He was one of these modish television people, you know what they're like. He said, I'm not really comfortable with you referencing a song that's 100 years old. So I said, okay, from now on, we're only going to do songs that are 110 years old. And this is one of them. And most of the big songs from 1914 are forgotten. And the ones that aren't forgotten are mostly heard in the context of their era. But this is one that evokes, that is not just evocative of the era, but is for all time. If you'd been on Broadway in 1914, where they were still importing European operettas and the musical forms of European operettas, and the big theater composers like Victor Herbert wrote in mimicry of that style, then this just came out of the blue to you. It is no one thought that Broadway would be the home for intimate, conversational love songs in 4/4 tempo. And this is the very first of them.
And when I told them how wonderful you are, they didn't believe me. They didn't believe me. Your lips, your smile, your curly hair are in a class beyond compare. You're the loveliest thing that one could see. And when I tell them, and I'm certainly gonna tell them, that I'm the girl whose boy one day you'll be, they'll never believe me. They'll never believe me that from this great big world you've chosen me. And when I tell them, and I'm certainly gonna tell them, that I'm the girl whose boy one day you'll be, they'll never believe me. They'll never believe me that from this great big world you've chosen me.
Thank you so much, Marla. That's an absolutely cracking start. That is a song from a show at the Knickerbocker Theatre in 1914 called The Girl from Utah. Anybody here ever seen The Girl from Utah? No, because no one's shown the slightest interest in that show since 1914. It was actually a London show, and the American producer thought that it could use a little bit of help in the first act, so he got Jerome Kern and Herbert Reynolds to write that song. Any Herbert Reynolds fans in the house tonight? No, well, he was a guy from Manchester called M.E. Rourke. He wrote that, and he never wrote anything remotely like it ever again. But it's a fantastic, if you remember, there's that triplet on which Mahler sang, and I'm certainly going to tell them. And no one knows whether Jerome Kern chose to set certainly on that triplet, or whether M.E. Rourke chose to put certainly on those notes. But it's brilliant and conversational, and it invented the modern American theater song, which is usually A-A-B-A. So you have an 8-bar phrase, you repeat it, and then you have a middle section, and then you go back to the original 8-bar phrase. And the only thing that's different about this is they have a sort of premature middle section, because they have the 8-bar phrase, and then they go in to the bit about your lips, your eyes, your cheeks, your hair are in a class beyond compare, which is different, and then they go back to 2 more AA sections. But basically, Jerome Kern, right out of the blue, invented the American theater song. You can do it in any style. You want to try swinging it, Marla?
Ross. And when I told them how wonderful you are, they didn't believe me. They didn't believe me. And when I told them how wonderful you are, they didn't believe me. They didn't believe me.
Try a little rock and roll.
And when I told them how wonderful you are, they didn't believe me. They didn't believe me.
Okay. And that is why in the last 110 years, Dinah Shaw, Dinah Washington, Stan Kenton, Elvis Costello, all these people have all, and hundreds more, have all done that song. Kern is a great composer. Herbert Reynolds is a one-hit wonder. John Steele Gordon said on Monday that that when he was talking about the history of the American theater, and with due respect to Rodgers and Hammerstein, there's no song that has had the influence of what we just heard. None of the critics who were there for the opening night of The Girl from Utah, not the New York Times man or the New York Sun guy, thought that song worth mentioning. But everybody else understood what it meant. George Gershwin was 16 years old, and that's the song that made him decide he wanted to compose for the theater, as opposed to being a Tin Pan Alley composer writing pop songs. That song, he didn't go to the show, but it was such a huge hit that when he went to his aunt's wedding a few weeks later, the band played it, and he went up to them and said, what's that? That's the song that made him want to be a composer. And 2 years later, he was Jerome Kern's rehearsal pianist. Same with Cole Porter. Cole Porter loved that song, wrote a very famous parody of it. John Steele Gordon made the point that on Broadway, the words and music are equally important. I'm not actually sure about that. There's nothing sadder than a really great lyric set to a totally indifferent tune. Alan J. Lerner, the author of My Fair Lady and Brigadoon and Paint Your Wagon and Gigi and Camelot, Alan used to say that the first requirement of a good lyric is good music, and I agree with that. But there are plenty of fabulous tunes with completely inadequate lyrics. If you know The Merry Widow Waltz is one of the most beautiful tunes ever written, and nobody has ever been able to write words of an equal quality that sit in it. I remember once sitting in the garden with Andrew Lloyd Webber. His garden, he's got a much bigger garden than me. Don't know how that happened, but Andrew started going on about what a great tune that was. Da da dee da 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 dee da 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 da, and he was so excited about it. He goes, and then he just varies it ever so slightly. Da da dee da da, and I go, well, you're doing an awful lot of da da dee dying, and he goes, well, I don't think I really know the words. What are they? And so I conjured it from the back of my memory, and I went, every touch of fingers tells me what I know. And he goes, every touch of fingers? In that case, I don't want to know about it.